So one of the tips that is huge when it comes to portrait photography is the use of space around our subject. So in this photo in particular, if you go to the geometry tab in develop mode, you can of course recrop the photo. Yeah, the background is a little close. Let's try to fine tune. That's a lot better. And now all of a sudden, our photo looks so much better just by doing a little bit of cropping. So if I go to the general settings here, I'll immediately decide to increase the exposure a little bit and maybe some saturation. And now that's before and after. If I select my subject, okay, so maybe I'll reduce a little bit of contrast. I'll add some saturation and vibrance and maybe even a little clarity to my subject because the lines in her face tell a story. I'm just going to increase the saturation also a little bit to make her pop more from the background. And let's see if I can add a bit more brightness to her skin. So now if you take a look, I'm in the color EQ tab of masking. If I bring the oranges down, you'll see how her skin all of a sudden turned really dark. And I can brighten her skin just by moving the orange slider. So that's a simple edit that makes our subject look a lot more prominent. If I duplicate the mask and invert it, I could even reduce exposure in the background. Not a lot. I can reduce clarity to make it a bit more fuzzy and try to bring more attention to our subject. Show original. So that's a simple, I just wanted to show that photo to showcase how the headroom can create a big difference when you're editing portraits. So, okay, so I have this photo, obviously. It's a nice photo, but it probably needs a bit more, yeah, a bit more dynamism, a bit more energy. So let's try to do what we usually do, which is separating our subject from the background a little bit. A bit more contrast, a bit more exposure. A touch more vibrance. So just that slight edit, as you can see, that's before and after. Our attention is drawn a lot more thanks to the color and the change we've made in comparison to the background. Let's select the background. And bring the exposure slightly down. Saturation is good. And we're gonna also do a little bit of geometry. So we're also going to crop this photo a little bit. That's a lot better. Now, the clarity slider is going to be huge when you're dealing with portraits. Why? Because it will really help when you're trying to sort of soften some of the blemishes, some of the skin. So, for example, here in clarity, if I reduce clarity, notice obviously I'm reducing clarity and everything. So if you look at the jeans, they're also reducing clarity. Like it's becoming a bit more blurry, which just doesn't really help us. But look at her skin tone, how it changed. Not her skin tone. Look at her the blemishes in her face. So this is with the clarity in a normal setting, and if we start reducing clarity, you can see that her skin starts kind of like cleaning up a little bit. Something else that you can always do in develop mode too is you can add a brush mask. Let's say you want to bring a bit more energy to her eyes, a bit more color to her eyes. All you have to do is select the brush mask and brush over the eyes. Let's do that again. And I'm gonna need a bit more, a bit less pressure. So pressure when you're doing masking, when you're doing brush masking, is obviously kind of like the opacity of the brush. So that was very strong selection. So I'm just gonna bring the pressure down. Um, I'm gonna increase feathering, and there I can have a bit more of a easier time making that selection. So now I have her eye selected just by using the brush. And if I hide my mask and increase exposure and saturation, I'm making her eyes stand out a lot more. So now that I have an edit that I like a little bit more, I can bring this image to edit mode. And so you can start editing in develop and then bring your photos to edit just by clicking edit. And this will bring your edited photo into edit mode. If you head over to the filter menu here on the left, it's called face edit. All of a sudden, we're now able to edit a specific, um, very, very specific parts of our subject's face. So we're not going to mess around with any sort of geometry in our subject's face, but we are going to maybe add a bit more sharpening in her eyes right here. And because I've already increased their exposure a little bit, I'm not going to increase whitening in the eyes here. But if I go over to skin, this will be the easiest way to smooth out people's skins. So if I if I drag the smoothing slider to the right, you will see that we can still see the blemishes in her skin, but we've softened them in a way that's very tactful. And so we're not completely um, eliminating this feature of this person, but we're simply trying to make other parts or other, elements in her face stand out a bit more. If we add a little bit of glow, this will also help us with some of the skin details. So this is how our subject skin looked before, and this is how it looks after. Click done, and now we have a much stronger, cleaner portrait compared to the original photo. Because we're in edit mode, this is a destructive environment, so if we click done, we are gonna have to save the changes to this image. So it's okay. We'll save portrait 07B. And just to show you guys, this is crazy because this photo is probably taken in like a kitchen or something. If I increase the exposure, check what's behind. There's a water bottle there. It's like a kitchen cabinet or something. It's not great. But the photographer was really smart. and try to, create a very dramatic image in a very non-dramatic space, which can be a kitchen. Okay, so let's see what we can do here. I'm going to select my subject first, and you'll notice that the selection is picking up on her face and not her full self. But that's okay. We can always increase our selection. Okay, so now that I have my subject selected, if I decrease the exposure, you can see that I can start seeing a lot more details that maybe we had lost because of how bright our photo was. The cool thing is I'm only affecting my subject and not the background. So this is how it was before, which is a little bit overblown. And I'm just going to drag it down a little bit to bring back a bit more detail in her face. Now, you can see that I can still see I kind of want to hide fully what's happening behind her. And so I'm going to duplicate this mask, invert this mask, and just decrease saturate exposure. Something else that's really important in your photos is to get a white balance that really works for you. So in this photo right here, you have different options. You have automatic as shot, which is how the camera decided the white balance the moment the photo was taken. But I feel like this photo could be a little bit better if I make it a touch warmer. And so I'm bringing the temperature slider a bit to the right. It was around here before -10. And if I bring it to 4, I have a much warmer photo. And it's a bit more pleasant to the eye, at least in my opinion. To try to preserve this sort of, maybe not angelic, but this sort of kind of interesting, very light photo we have, I'm going to I'm going to decrease contrast a little bit to soften everything up a little bit more. And again, what I'm going to do is, because I can't open this photo in Face Edit, but I do want to try to edit the blemishes in her face a little bit, in right here, her forehead, and a bit in her cheeks. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select only that parts of her face, and I'm going to reduce clarity on them. So I'm going to go ahead and select the brush. And now I'm going to brush over those areas. Let's see what happens if I reduce clarity. So that's clarity increased, a lot of texture in her skin. And now, if I reduce it, it becomes a lot more soft. And you don't want to go extreme, obviously. You want to preserve some of the details in her face. So this is before, a great shot, and after, our photo becomes warmer, it becomes a bit more pleasing. And I think I can still work a bit more with color. So I'm going to go back to my subject selection and go ahead and move to color EQ and see, let's see what we can do if I increase reds. Not, I'm increasing, just so you know, when you go to the color EQ tab in masking, you have different options to affect color. So by default, it'll open in brightness. So for example, if I bring the orange slider fully to the left, I'm reducing brightness on the orange colors. If I bring it to the right, I'm increasing brightness. So this, if I move the orange slider to the right, this actually is helping our photo by bringing a bit more pop to her skin. But if I wanted to increase the color of the skin itself, then I can head to the saturation option below color EQ and increase the orange, maybe the yellows and reds, which will probably affect more her lips. So this is our photo before and after. We can start seeing a big difference in how this photo feels. And now, as a final touch, what I would do is I would add another brush selection and try to work more with her eyes. Let's start showing our selection here. I'm going to try to be more thorough this time. I'm probably going to want to bring a bit more saturation to her eyes. And what we're doing is we are not changing our subject, really. We're just enhancing their features in a way that makes the photo more a better photo. So look at that. I've increased the saturation in her eyes, maybe a little bit too much, but I do like it. I can increase exposure again, just a little bit. And there we have it. Again, I can go and add vignette, although it doesn't really, you can't really tell since the top left and right corners are already dark. So this is really good. I really like this. And now maybe I can get away with adding a color LUT. And so a color LUT, what we'll do is it's gonna change sort of like the color science of your photo. So whereas if you go to effects, you will see the photo effects, which are filters. Filters is just an overlay of a certain kind, of a certain color that's on top of your image. A color LUT, which is color lookup table, what it does is it actually changes the colors of your photo. And so it's a deeper change um, compared to a filter. So if I add the beige filter, obviously the color LUT, sorry, adding the beige color LUT is quite intense, and I would always recommend to try to bring back, whenever you add a color LUT, bring it back. So I've added the beige color LUT, which I think is awesome. Um, it gives our photo this sort of cinematic look, but it's a bit too much. And so if I want to change that, I'll go ahead and reduce its opacity and just add a little bit of it like that. Maybe I'll add a bit more there. So we went from a really cool photo taken in a very normal environment with smart lighting to creating a photo that is a bit looks a bit um, more inviting, more a bit softer, but also a stronger image. Something else that I think could thanks, John. If you're looking to create um, images that look a little bit more cinematic, a little bit more like this, for example, here, let's try other color LUTs just out of curiosity. So we have dusk, we have elegance, film. It's a really popular one. And this is giving, um, what was that? What's that movie with Bruce Willis where he's like in a different kind of like planet or something? And there's this girl has orange hair. I think it's from late 90s. Famous movie. Anyways, this film LUT is pretty cool. And I'm going to drag the opacity a bit down. So there we go. Before, after. As I was saying, if you, for example, want to achieve a cinematic effect on your image and not necessarily apply any LUT, the fifth element, that's it. Thanks, Chuck. What you can do is you can change how your blacks look in that photo. And to do that, we're going to open tone curves. This is it's open in the green channel, but if you open them for because I was messing around with greens on another photo, but if you open tone curves for the first time in develop mode or anywhere, you will see the standard curve and you will see the RGB graph. So what a lot of people do to try to edit specific parts, and so just to speak about the tone curve here, to the left we have blacks, and to the right we have whites. Sorry, to the bottom left we have blacks. To the top right we have whites. Bottom left, blacks. Top right, whites. And in the middle we got the midtones. If you place a lot of editors, what they do is they apply what is called an S curve. An S curve, what it does is that it increases your highlights and reduces your blacks, giving your photo a lot more contrast, right? And so this is a very detailed way you can achieve contrast in a more customizable way, okay? We're not really gonna get into that. Maybe we're gonna leave that how it is. Bring the blacks a bit more. We're just kind of what I want to show you is a bit is different. So having this dot selected really close to the in the shadows, close to the blacks, but not in the blacks. What this allows you to do later, and I could even place another one here. So whenever you placed one square here, this will add kind of like an anchor point into your curve. And so if I drag the corner here, the beginning of my line of my curve, if I drag it up, you will see that the blacks start becoming gray, 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 gray. And if I bring them to the top, all of a sudden they become whites. And so this photo looks really good. And I'm going to export it. Just kidding. It looks really weird. But if I drag the blacks just a little bit to the top, just a little bit above, my blacks are not fully black anymore and they acquire this sort of film characteristic. Maybe we'll try another photo so that we can witness or be able to see that effect more. So let's keep going with this sort of like cinematic look we got going on. One final thing that you can do, I don't know if this is going to work fully for this photo, but we can try, is to add grain. And so basically what we've done with this photo is we've taken an obviously digital image and we've sort of like slowly transformed it into a more cinematic photo. And maybe if we add some grain, that could help us out. So in the effects tab in develop mode, you will see the grain tool. And you can add some grain to your image. giving your photo a lot more texture, um, and obviously making it seem like it was taking on film. And I think that's good for this image. I think we've done a lot. We've edited her skin. We've added a bit more saturation to her eyes. We've brought a bit more color to her skin. We've softened the skin. We've darkened the corners here, and we've added a color LUT. So this is how the image was before and how the image looks after. Definitely a strong edit. Let's click done. And now let's try to go back to face edit since we haven't looked too much on what face edit can do. And this photo right here will be perfect for it. So already an amazing photo. And maybe we can still um, have a little bit more impact by doing certain adjustments. So um, let me know, do you guys use face edit? Do you find it type 0 if you never use it, type 1 if you use it sometimes, type 2 if you actually use it a lot? Let me know. I'm curious. So mostly ones and twos. Okay, so you guys are familiar. You guys are familiar with face edit and what it can do. We do see some zeros, so just so you can get a sense of the power of face edit, you can edit anything. And things can get definitely really strange, right? So let's say you have a family member that you don't really like too much. You can bring the photo into AI face edit and always give them a little bit of a weirdness if you don't like them. And a cool tip, and this will work for any slider in ACDSee, um, if you right click on any of the circles here in your sliders, then they will all reset to 0. So that's something to keep in mind. Okay. Now, I can tell that her right eye is a little bit smaller sorry, her left eye is a little bit smaller compared to her right eye. So I can actually change that a little bit. And if you go to the eyes option here and you reduce, for example, the left eye, you will see that both eyes are changing, right? And so if you only want to affect one eye, just make sure that you unlink these two sliders. Okay. So now I can increase the size of the other eye to try to bring it a bit more closer to her other eye. Let's not go crazy because we will still want to keep this photo feeling natural. But that light edit works. Now in face edit, I can add sharpening to her eyes and widening, which will make her eyes pop a lot more, which is really nice. And again, if I go to skin, I can apply some smoothing to her skin and some glow, which in this photo, it really works because this is um, a posed photo in a studio. So it's kind of like has that vibe already. And if we show previous, we'll see that we have cleaner looking face. We might have lost a bit of detail in um, her freckles there, but still a stronger image in the end. So this is how it looked before and after. So definitely there's more attention brought to her eye, to her face. And actually, I don't know if that the eye edit, the other I edited really works, but that's the power of AI face edit. Ola says, please do a quick way, simple ways of editing grouped pictures at once. Let's say 20, 30 pictures. That's actually a really, um, that's actually a really good idea, Ola. I don't think I'll have time to show you that here since we only have about 13 minutes left, but I think a batch editing workshop would be really good. We haven't done that before, and I probably there's a lot of people that, yeah, do want to edit a lot of pictures at once. So let's take a look at one last photo. Okay, so this is a pretty neat photo, but there's some issues with the temperature of everything. So definitely this photo is looking greenish, and not only because of the actual greens that are around our subject, but her skin tone um doesn't look quite right. So I'll open the white balance and just try to see what happens if I go to auto, and it's actually a lot worse. So I'll just stay in as shot, but maybe I'll add a bit more warmth and just a slightly bit more pink tint. Like that. A small difference, but still, it makes her look a little better. I'm going to select the background, and ACDSee did a really good job there. And maybe I'll decrease the exposure of the trees and maybe even some of its saturation. Not a lot. Let's select our subject. ACDC did a really good job there too. And I have a feeling that adding some saturation is definitely going to help us. Not only it helps us bring more attention to her, but it also helps her skin tone. Starts looking a bit more natural. So let's just see how that changed our photo. This is how our photo looked before. It has a weird um, sort of tint in her skin, which we got rid of thanks to the white balance. So, super important that you always check the white balance. And this is how it looked after. We corrected white balance. We brought down the greens a little bit in the background. We added saturation to our subject, and our photo starts looking a lot better. Let's see if we can do something with geometry. Do we have a bit too much headroom? I don't know. Maybe it's good. We'll just reduce it slightly. Oops, I clicked on. Less like Morticia Adams' family. Yes, exactly. So this is how it looked before and how it looks after. It's a lot better. Now, let's go ahead and select again our subject. And maybe we can add even a bit more skin, some nicer skin tones. A bit more orange, maybe a bit more red. That's too much orange. And that's good. Just a subtle difference can make a really big change. And again, as we've been doing in our other photos, I'm just going to add a bit more detail. I'm going to bring a bit more attention to her beautiful brown eyes. by selecting her eyes with the brush tool. So I think this is a workflow that you should always keep in mind is does whenever you have a portrait, it's like, is there too much headroom? Can I crop this photo to bring more attention to my subject? And then continue to think, okay, does the skin look natural? Does the white balance need to be adjusted so that the skin looks better? Then you can continue being, can I add a bit more tone to her skin? Um, so it's focusing on the headroom, focusing on the skin, and then maybe you can do a little bit of work in the eyes. And I think this would be a really good starting point for anyone who's trying to get into portrait photography. So now I'm increasing the exposure in her eyes. Brought the exposure fully left just to give you a sense of how creepy things can look, but I'm just gonna bring more brightness to her eyes and definitely more saturation. If I increase clarity in her eyes, it's sort of like a sharpening, giving a bit more texture. Maybe I went a bit too crazy. Okay, let's bring it back. Yeah. And so before and after. I think this photo would definitely benefit with a little bit of a vignette to bring even more attention to our subject. And there we have it. So you can always rescue a photo that has a sort of incorrect white balance just by going to the white balance slider here. Okay, guys. Well, thank you for joining. I'm gonna keep working on portraits because it's fun and I feel like there's a lot for me to learn. But I hope that this was helpful for you too. The tools in ACDSee are great, and it's just how creative you can get with them. And so, okay, guys, thank you so much.